For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. Here we go, episode 83. Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the podcast, share it with an adventure buddy. Send them a link. Word of mouth really helps this show to grow, so any help is appreciated. What do we got here? 2024 guided canoe trips are officially out. Dates are out at buffaloroamer.com. We have some awesome trips lined up this year, fully guided and outfitted wilderness canoe trips, led by yours truly, buffaloroamer.com. You can get the trips and dates. We're going to Moab, Utah on the Green River. We're going to the mighty Mississippi, and we're going to the Wisconsin River, to name a few. All epic and amazing trips. So buffaloroamer.com for our 2024 guided canoe trips, and you can reach out to me for more info. Today's podcast, I should mention, is brought to you by Fischel Paddles, makers of fine handcrafted wooden canoe paddles, Fishell paddles.com. Also brought to you by SRE Outdoors, family owned and operated outdoor gear shop at sregear.com. Today's episode's a good one. I got my buddy Paul Fuzinski on the podcast. Paul is the host of the Aptitude Outdoors podcast and YouTube channel. He's got all kinds of great stuff. I really enjoy his show, and he's a thoughtful guy and always enjoy chatting with him. This is his second time on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. He has a new short documentary out on his YouTube channel, Aptitude Outdoors. It's called The Hunt Within. Really well produced. We chat quite a bit about it here in the opening section of the podcast, so go check that out. It's only 15 minutes, so really easy to digest and well shot and good, well thought out, I thought. So The Hunt Within from Aptitude Outdoors. And without further ado, Paul Fuzinski on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Paul, what's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back on. It's awesome to finally get to talk to someone. I've been rocking solo on my podcast for a while, so it's cool to have some human conversation here.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited to talk about your solo stuff because you've been doing some awesome stuff, starting with the documentary that you just put out. Man, I was really impressed with the quality of the cinematography and interesting story, of course, as well, with your kind of delve into hunting and the kind of the transition of being an outdoorsman to a hunter. But yeah, awesome work, man. How long have you been messing with the cameras?
So yeah, I've been doing video stuff for probably close to like 7 or 8 years. I just kind of happenstance learned it by getting into YouTube. And then, when you're outdoors, a lot of stuff you do, especially if you're like have a podcast or Instagram, you're always taking photos and stuff and trying to keep people up to date with what's going on. And it eventually just evolved over time to me, like getting more interested in topics. And on top of that, being more interested in filmmaking, and then like the interest of the outdoors and conservation and the interest in filmmaking kind of met in the middle with that documentary. It's called The Hunt Within. And it was probably took me like a year and a half to do that, because when you go from, I don't like to say like just being a YouTuber guy, but like making a YouTube style video versus making a actual like documentary film is a huge difference. So I had to learn basically everything from the ground up, from, production and how to interview someone not in a conversational style. And that was honestly the hardest part, because we're used to having like this conversation as podcasters, and it was kind of hard to tell myself to shut up and let them talk. that was a difficult time, because you're used to being able to butt in and stuff like that. So it was fun, man. I'm really getting obsessed with it, and I'm kind of, as you said, like incorporating that almost into my podcast now. Like I'm trying to make them almost like mini documentaries, just to make them more interesting and to give me more practice with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I was really impressed with with the quality of the production, and I could tell it took some time. It sounded like old Steven Ranella there, man.
Everybody says that. It's so funny that you say that because so many people have told me that I sound like Steven Ranella. I think it's just because we're from like the same part of the country. I mean, I grew up in Southeast Michigan, and obviously he's from up in a little bit in northern part of the state. And that's just how people talk. So I mean, I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get. It's a good compliment, but I think it's just my accent here of in this weird part of the Midwest that I don't even know if it's technically the Midwest or not, but it's just what we talk like.
Yeah, it's funny. That is a funny discussion, isn't it? I've had some actually on some
Mhm.
river trips. Now that you bring that up, I've had some interesting conversations about, all right, and I don't even know what the different boundaries are, but like, is Ohio the Midwest or the Rust Belt or like Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania, I think, is east, but you know, it's a funny conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember in college I had a professor where it was like geography or something we were taking, and you know, we had this big philosophical discussion about what's considered the Midwest. And I think, if I remember correctly, he said that Ohio and Michigan are not considered the Midwest. There was some other like technical term, but like for all intents and purposes, it's basically the Midwest. I mean, like we do, like you watch the You Betcha guy, and it's like I can relate to all of that stuff, and that's very Midwestern. So it's like, I don't know, man.
Oh yeah.
Take it or leave it. I don't really care. We walleye fish, it's all the same.
Uh, how did you how did you decide to put this documentary together, and how did you decide on the story, and delve into the story a little bit too? I mean, I watched it, but just give us kind of like a background on how you came to do this project, I guess.
Yeah, so it was really a internal battle I had. It's like the kind of the talking point of the film is, it's like the intersection between hunting and wildlife conservation. And I didn't grow up as someone who hunted, like I grew up, my dad had the intention of like taking us hunting and stuff, but I mean, parents are busy. He had to work a lot. We were little jerks, so he had to like make sure that we stayed alive and all that stuff. So I didn't get to hunt or anything when I was a kid. And as I got older, I kind of got into a lot more outdoor. I've always been like outdoorsy kind of dude. Like I kind of got my roots in long distance backpacking and stuff with the AT, which we talked about, ad nauseum on the last podcast we did. And like I got, I just got this feeling like I wanted to participate more in like the natural cycle of the world, and that's kind of like where my anthropology background and my outdoors background kind of met. And I was like, so like for millions of years, people survived off of like hunting and gathering basically, and I'd never had that experience about hunting. And then I know I was on the Appalachian Trail, I read a lot of like Eustace Conway and stuff. Like if you've ever read the story about him, The Last American Man, I always really liked that book. And um it kind of got me thinking like it's very part of our human ancestry to hunt, and I've never experienced that. So like first thing when I got home from the trail, I started learning what it needed to do to hunt. I didn't know anybody that hunted really. I just kind of asked around my friends, and nobody was really into it. I had one guy, his name was Bill, and he was like, I haven't hunted since I was a teenager and I'm trying to get back into it. So we just kind of teamed up, and I killed my first deer like maybe a year or two after I got home from the Appalachian Trail. And then I was like, this is like really weird feeling because I'd never, like in American society nowadays, like we don't really kill stuff, unless you're a farmer, you're probably grown up around, having to kill stuff every once in a while. And unless you live in that world where you're either like working food production or you're a farmer, you're not really exposed to killing stuff. And it was such a strange feeling to me. And I didn't really know how I felt about it. And then the more I hunted and the more I learned about hunting, the more excited I got about it, because it's like it's not only is hunt people have this view that hunting is just killing stuff or killing stuff and eating it, and a lot of the discussion revolves around food. But if you kind of peel back that surface level of things, you realize that hunting is really like the wheel that spins that, like, well, hunting and fishing, but hunting and fishing together are that wheel that spin that keep conservation funded and active. And I like was mind blown once I kind of learned that by just kind of like getting involved in conservation clubs and stuff, and just trying to like, I'm just kind of that person when I get into something, I'm like into it. And I feel like you can relate to that, like fishing
Oh
and
yeah,
canoeing and stuff. You get into it and you go down the rabbit hole all the way.
100%.
And the yeah, the more I learned, the more I got excited about this, like what they call the North American model of wildlife conservation. And I just it's so complicated. It's very hard to understand beyond the base level of like most hunters have heard of something like the Pittman-Robertson Act, and you buy ammo and stuff, hunting stuff, and it goes towards conservation. Everybody kind of has that like base level understanding, but the more you learn about it and the more you learn about the history, it gets very nuanced and complicated and awesome and fun. And I was kind of when I wanted to make this documentary, I was caught in this place where I was like, I have grown to really love hunting, but I also don't really understand. And I love animals. I love wildlife conservation. I've always kind of had this environmentalist side of me. So they kind of like came together, and I was trying to work out how this made sense. And I went to an event that I helped my buddy Derek with called the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit. And sorry, this is a super long story, but it's just the way
No,
it
that's
happened.
great.
And and we get there, and he invites all these really big time conservationists that I'm sitting face to face with, and I'm like, hey, can you do an interview? I've been like thinking about doing this documentary, and I have a camera, like my friend Seth's here. We're recording podcasts. I have audio equipment. Let's like can we talk about conservation? And they were like, sure, yeah. And I met this guy. His name's Andrew Austin. He's like an ecologist. He's a naturalist. He's real young, and he's very much like philosophical. And we got to know each other over the couple days we were there. And I was like, dude, I really want to interview you for this podcast. And like we just kind of knew each other in passing. And I sat him down and asked him some questions about conservation. And dude blew my mind. And then I had known my friend Chester Moore for years at this point, and I knew he was big into conservation, and he writes about wildlife all the time. That's his job. And he gave an awesome interview, and I was like thinking like, man, I've never heard of this stuff explained this way. And then Renee Thornton and Gray Thornton, who run the Wild Sheep Foundation and the Women Hunt program, which is a branch of the Wild Sheep Foundation, were both there. And I was like, I know you guys are like super big in this conservation world. Like Wild Sheep Foundation is one of the biggest conservation organizations on planet Earth. And I'm like, they were like getting ready to leave to go catch their airplane. I was like, can you give me like 20 minutes? Like, please, just like a quick interview. Like if you have to go, you can just get up and leave. And they're like, sure. And they had these super awesome perspectives from the side of like they work in that world. That's their job, is to do conservation. So I got this like broad scope from like someone who works as an ecologist, is in the field, all the way up to someone who's dealing with millions and millions of dollars a year in conservation funds, and where that goes and how that works. And it was basically pure luck that these people were there. And so we put like, I had never made a real documentary before, and it was very intimidating. That's why it took a year and a half. Like it was just so overwhelming. I didn't know what to do with it. And I had my friend Seth Geib help me out. He was a blessing, because he really helped like craft the story together with me. And we get basically done, and I'm like, all right, well, now what do we do? And he's like, we showed some friends who work as filmmakers, like they're conservation filmmakers. Like one of them has done some stuff with National Geographic and all this. Like they know what they're doing. So we're like, what do we do? Like we're at this point and we like don't know where to go anymore. And they sat down with us, and they're like, you need to like tie all these interviews together. And I'm like, well, how? They're like, there's a lot of options. I was like, well, I could just do voiceover. And they're like, why don't you just like be the narrator and like narrate through these sections and then like tell the story? Like you're the one who's interested in this stuff. Like link
That's
each
great.
section together with being like, why does this matter to you? And I was like, the whole point was I didn't want to be in it, because I'm always on the podcast. I'm always like on everything. You know what I mean though? Cause you're the same way. Like you're always on everything. You're in something, and it's like your face all the time. I was like, I want to like separate it from me. And they're like, well, nobody else is going to do it. It's your project. And I was like, damn it, you're right. So long story short, I ended up doing the narration for it because I have the podcast equipment and audio equipment already. So it kind of came together, and then we literally sat down. Seth and I locked ourselves in his house, I think, for about a week straight. And it was like a frenzied moment, like that you read about in like books where like just that's all you do for like days at a time. And we just cranked it out and got it done finally. Like we kept pushing it off and pushing it off basically out of nerves. Like we don't know what we're doing and it's intimidating. And we locked ourselves in and got it done. And we premiered it last year at the summit. And then we released it literally like 2 days ago. I don't know when you're putting this out, but it was like literally just came out on YouTube. We finally decided to release it because a lot of people urged us to go that route of like the traditional filmmaker, which I'm not a traditional filmmaker, of like put it through the festival circuit and try and win some awards. And I was like, at the end of the day, I really don't give a shit about any of that stuff. Like I really like you know what I mean? Like you're like, we're both like free spirited dudes. Like when we want to do something, we don't care if anybody agrees with it or is like,
Yeah.
Worried if we complete something or not. Like we just go out and do it because we can and we
Put it
know
out.
we want to. Yeah. So we're like, fuck that. We're going to put it out. And you gamble. I mean, we put it on YouTube, but like the point is like, do I want people to see it and learn about conservation, or do I want a bunch of people who are film nerds like critiquing like, oh, your push in on the third scene was just too long? I'm like, I don't care. I'm trying to teach
Right.
people. It's not about it, like it's the best quality
Yeah.
film of all time because it's my first film,
Yeah, it's
But yeah.
awesome. And
Thank you.
I think that's a big part of it too, is the first one, and you did it and you put it out, and yeah, I was really impressed with the quality of it, just like the quality of the production, and lots of things to note on your I don't want to say ramble, but on on your soliloquy there.
It was a ramble.
A few things. One, I guess first to Aptitude Outdoors podcast. If you just Google that, the YouTube page will pop up, and that's where you can find the documentary we're talking about. But I got several notes. I love the transition from hiking the AT to like automatically just intuitively like taking that next step of being like, okay, I love the woods, I love camping, I love being out here, like, but there is something more to it. And I've gone on that kind of path or transition as well. And I remember one time where it kind of clicked with me the first time was when I was in Alaska and paddling the Yukon River. We were up at a ranger station in the Yukon Charlie River Preserve. It's like kind of like a national park, I think. Anyway, a real remote ranger cabin up there. And we were staying with the guy that was tending the ranger cabin, a native guy from the local area. I think he was from Circle, if I'm not mistaken. And we're talking with him, and he's like, yeah, you get people, like from the South, I forget the term he used, but whatever. He's like, people don't understand. They think wilderness is just like wild and like no human interaction or no human impact at all. Like humans are removed. But he's like, we've been living here forever. And humans have always been an integral part of the natural life cycle of, regulating herds, of hunting, of consuming, of working the land. To think of humans removed from that natural, from the world, like, we affect the environment and, just like a beaver does, or like whatever, and we're completely tied in this ecosystem. So to think of like wilderness as having no human impact is just naive, and we're tied into that system. With that being said, obviously you want places in this modern world where you can escape and experience remoteness, I suppose, and all those ecologies and things that are still intact. But to think of us removed, as I think I did before, just
Mhm.
unknowingly. It's just not right, I think.
Yeah, you definitely are hitting the nail on the head with that, and that is something that it's inherently American to think that we are removed from nature, and it's just like this ladder. It's not even really a ladder. It's just the best analogy I can get off the top of my head. Like it's this ladder we think we're climbing to, like, every year there's more and more people. Every year there's less and less, natural space, and these cities are expanding, and there's just like massive urban sprawl, and it's like very much built into the way America was founded as a country, like how we just spread out across everything, and like we have this like urge to dominate the land. I think it's just inherent in human beings though, because that's just how we are. But we've in a sense, at a some level, feel that we've removed ourselves from nature, like we're above nature, but it's actually like the opposite. We're absolutely hurting ourselves terribly every single day by having that mindset, not only because like we're destroying these places that are just like ingrained into who we are as like beings. Like we evolved as to human beings through this like millions of years, and we were like on savannas, and we spread throughout the globe, and like all this stuff that we were intertwined lived as part of the natural world for so long. And then we just hit this era where like technology just like was exponential. Like we learned so much faster, we built things so much faster, and there's only been a few, really, I mean, there's been a few thousand years, but there's only been a few hundred years where we haven't been like somewhat connected to the natural world. Like even 10,000 years ago is when they say about human civilization started. Up till now, it's gone from like that to like this like steady growth of like civilization to like the like Egyptians and Europe and all these big countries around the world, kind of like these globalized countries. And then all of a sudden it was like the Industrial Revolution, and then like bam, within like 100 years it was like, holy shit, we have AI technology that's like, it's like this, it just went so fast. So for us to be modernly thinking about how we're like above nature and removed is like a not even like a drop in the ocean. It's like a planet in a speck of dust in the universe. Like it's so recent, so soon, and we don't even know what we're doing to ourselves by not being part of the outdoors. Like we have all these weird health problems, our guts are all screwed up, like everybody's overweight, and it's all this stuff that's just like not, our bodies aren't meant to do, that we're doing to ourselves. And then we're like trying to reverse engineer it, like how do we get this better? And everyone's
Standing
concerned
death.
about like, yeah, like take more pills, like no, that's not the solution. Like you need to do things a little differently. And like I'm not saying that it gets ultra philosophical, because like, yeah, it used to also suck. Like you'd freeze to death. Right now it's like 7 degrees outside my house right now. That would suck to live in too. So we have like this ultra uh gravy life right now, and like I am personally trying to reintroduce some of that like stuff that sucks back into my life, even though I hate doing it. Like I hate going to the gym, I hate sitting out in the cold when it's hunting like season or whatever. Like going out in the woods for like even a few weeks at a time or days at a time can be pretty brutal. But you have to like seek out those things now, because like your body at some point was like, it needs to experience that stuff. And that's just a weird mindset I have. But like I feel like you don't get the whole gamut of what it's like to be a human being without that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. 100%, 100%. Also,
Mm.
even being in your house, in a warm, heated house, as opposed to like, in the 1700s or 1800s, and a more harsh environment, but maybe we're saying maybe they were more connected to the land. It's, you still have to realize like the reason your house is heated, it all comes from the earth and from nature. It's like, your house
Mhm.
is heated by, I don't know how your house is heated, but the electricity is generated somehow. The power is generated somehow from either burning, uh, whatever it is. I'm too stupid to figure it out, but I know that it all comes from the earth, and we're all,
Yeah.
we're all tied in. And even if you can think about like, yeah, your house and efficiencies of your house in the environment that you're in, like north versus south facing windows, or whatever it may be, we're all a part of the system.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also like something that you touched on, like the absence of people from wilderness is also like a very much like thing that was developed here in the United States. Like when they built the national parks, and it's really hard to navigate as we like progress in society, because like there's a lot of things that happened when the national parks and stuff were built that were not good. You know what I mean? Like when Theodore Roosevelt established these national parks, he also was like kick out all the Native Americans, which sucks. Like they've got the shit end of the stick in every move that's been made. And then there's also like if he wouldn't have done that, built the national parks as they are and established these huge tracts of land during his presidency, almost 100% like there would be nothing left. Like big corporations would have ravaged. So like I don't even know how to come to terms with that. Like,
Yeah,
what do you,
I understand. Nothing's
how do you,
perfect. Yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah,
it's like you have to take the good with the bad, I suppose, because without that, there'd be no land left. And it would just be like corporations cutting down all the timber so we can have like nicer paper. Like, I don't know what building
yeah.
more houses, you know what I mean? So it's, it's definitely a rocky road to where we're at today with conservation, but that's just what you learn reading more about it, and you go down the rabbit hole. And a lot of people like to ignore that stuff, but it's like you got to take the good with the bad. You got to understand where it came from to why we are. And that's why so many Americans specifically have this mindset of like nature bad, or nature is a place where you go and there
Outside.
shouldn't be other people. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
nature is
Outside of my
where,
daily life.
yeah, whereas like I view it as just like something that is I'm part of, like when I go outside, it's no different than when I go to work. It's just like another thing that I do in my life. It's not like, but that's just like being a nerd, I think.
What have been some of the interesting things, or like an interesting tidbit or interesting person or factoid or something that you've learned while either researching your documentary and speaking with people, or in some of the individual podcasts that you've been putting out recently that are kind of, I guess I would say, like documentary style, or maybe just like historical informational style podcast episodes? What anything come to mind?
Yeah, actually. So I'm doing a series right now that's probably going to take me probably the majority of the rest of the year to finish up. And it's kind of like starting with like basically the founders of this North American model of wildlife conservation. It's basically a huge research project that I'm doing for myself, because that's kind of like the next documentary I want to make is based off of like those people. And so I started with Theodore Roosevelt, and then I did George Bird Grinnell, and then I'm about to do like Gifford Pinchot and John Muir and all of these big names in the history of North American conservation, like the way we think about it. I would say some of the interesting stuff I've learned is there's a ton, but like reading books by like Dan Flores and stuff about like how the savannas of the North America, it was like basically the Great Plains used to just have untold numbers of animals. Like you could literally see like millions of buffalo. The historical accounts were like we've all learned that like there used to be a lot of buffalo, but if you read like American Serengeti, the book, and like you start understanding the mass numbers that they were predicting that used to be out in the Great Plains of buffalo, it would be like we live in this area of the Midwest where there's lots of fields and stuff. So it'd be like looking out on the horizon and just like forever seeing buffalo. And same thing with like pronghorn and like elk. And they're just these massive herds that we can't even comprehend. And he was just like, it would be like going to essentially when people came to America and they started moving westward and started like Lewis and Clark and all these Western explorers, they were reporting on all this stuff that was like we couldn't even fathom nowadays. Because when I drive through the Great Plains, there ain't shit going on. You might see like a pronghorn bouncing around like off in the distance, or a couple of them, or like driving on the plains like up to the Rockies.
You just don't see it.
What's that?
Coyotes. I said there's shit going on. You just don't see
Yeah.
it. Coyotes and all kinds of animals. But yes, no, there's no buffalo anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah, but like you couldn't. I can't even physically comprehend what he's talking about. It's just like instead of driving on the highway and seeing like fields and fences and occasionally like a herd deer, it would just be animals as far as the eye could see. And then he basically goes chapter through chapter about how they like systematically wiped out each species. They like found their flaw and like a way to hunt them and just like exterminated them. And it's really a sad history, but it explains so much about how like where we are today and how we think about wildlife. And then it's also just like this thing where it's like it'll never be that way again unless humans like disappeared off the face of the earth. It'll never have those numbers of wildlife again, which we wouldn't even be able to live with them like that anyways. There's just too many people and we're like too far into the game to not to like have that come back like that. But it's just at this point, conservation is essentially like keeping these animals from going extinct and doing our best to try to like restore these ecosystems, because it's more than just X animal being an X pot. It's about how these animals interacted. And there's so many societal issues around like wolves and coyotes and all these predatory animals, grizzly bears, that like you even get people upset when you just bring it up. And it's just so crazy to think of like how this has happened. And when you read books like that, you show how like in your mind you understand the steps that were taken for that all to come together. I don't know. I could nerd out about this stuff for hours, dude. It's just like blows my mind.
Hey, it's Will here. I want to take a moment to let you know about our show sponsor and partner, Fischel Paddles, makers of fine, handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. I spent a lot of time paddling rivers and lakes, and Fischel paddles are the best canoe paddles that I've come across. I use the Ray Special model myself, and I outfit all the guided trips that I run with Fischel paddles too, because I think they're the best. Each paddle is handmade by Greg Fischel at his shop in Flagstaff, Arizona, from a single piece of wood. What I love most is the shape and feel of the paddle. Other than being beautiful and efficient, it puts less strain on your shoulders and arms than a typical paddle would, while actually giving you more control and finesse with each stroke. Plus, the shape of the blade just feels right cutting through the water. All paddles are customizable from the type of wood, whether that's cherry, ash, or maple, to laser engravings, and my favorite, which is the leather strap that Greg pins around the shaft so that it doesn't get beat up as you run along the gunnels, prying off or doing the J-stroke in the back of the stern there. So go get yourself a Fischel paddle now and feel the difference. Use the code WILL at checkout. That's WILL to get a free wooden paddle hanger with any paddle purchase. That way you can show off and organize that new handmade paddle. Check them out at FischelPaddles.com. That's FISHELL paddles.com. Fischel Paddles, handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. Hey, it's Will here. Want to take a moment to let you know about today's sponsor, SREgear.com. SRE Gear is a family-owned and operated outdoor gear shop in Black River Falls, Wisconsin, and they have everything you need for your next adventure. Whether you're camping, backpacking, hiking, paddling, or just getting out there and exploring, SREgear.com has the gear you need to get you to those places you love. I recently picked up a new Garmin InReach from SRE. I needed a new communication device for the guided canoe trips I've been leading, and after talking through a few options with the owner, Nick, there, he helped me sort out what I needed and get squared away. And that's one of the things that sets SREgear.com apart is the unbeatable customer service. Call or email with any questions, and you'll talk with the owner, Nick, or someone there close to him. So before you go and buy any outdoor equipment from a big box store, be sure to check out family-owned and operated SREgear.com, and be sure to use the discount code WILL at checkout for 10% off your first purchase. That's discount code WILL at checkout for 10% off. SREgear.com. Great gear, great prices, unbeatable customer service. You mentioned Theodore Roosevelt, one of the other guys, but there's two names you mentioned who I hadn't heard or wasn't familiar with.
George Bird Grinnell. Is that the one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Who's
he
him, and
is.
what was his big thing?
So he is like considered like the grandfather of conservation. He's kind of like one of the historical figures that doesn't get as much like street cred. Like Theodore Roosevelt gets all the credit because he was the president, so he's like the most well known. But there are a lot of these guys that kind of like helped him along, and Grinnell was kind of like this guy who just like was like a scholar. He was very smart, and he was very much like interested in the outdoors. He kind of helped like found Glacier National Park, Denali, what or it used to be called Mount McKinley, all this stuff that he had his hands in, but he also had his hands in like how this stuff was founded. He like helped found the Audubon Society, and he was just had his fingers in everything involved with conservation. He was a big hunter himself, and he was like the opposite side of what Theodore Roosevelt thought about Native Americans. He like really rallied to like try and give them fair treaties and stuff. What instead of like Theodore Roosevelt was like, kick them out of here. Who gives a shit? And he was like, no, we really shouldn't do this. He helped him found like the Boone and Crockett clubs and stuff like that. So he's just a really interesting guy, but he's kind of like the redhead stepchild. Like, just like nobody talks about him. And I found him to be very interesting. I'm still doing research on a lot of the other guys, so I don't have anything like as detailed. I literally just recorded the episode about him like a week ago, so it's pretty fresh in my
Right.
mind. But like just learning how these people interact, and then there's so many little pieces of the puzzle that came together in the conservation like ethos that just came together. It was like this weird
What
organic thing that came together that we now call the North American model. So
what do you think? What do you think is the next frontier of kind of those people and that movement in general, of wildlife, national parks, conservation, uh, hunting versus anti-hunters, just outdoor life in general? What do you think like is the next sphere of what's the future look like?
well the so I come from both sides. Like I've been deep into like the backpacking world, and now I'm deep into this like this hunting and fishing world, and I enjoy all of these activities. So it's not like you have to pick one or the other, you know what I mean? And my goal is to not necessarily convert people from that like the big phrases that people use in this realm are consumptive and non-consumptive, which is just like whatever. They're just terms that are used to describe. So like a backpacker or someone who likes to kayak and canoe but doesn't hunt would be considered non-consumptive user of the outdoor space. And then a hunter or a fisherman, which you and I are all of the above. We're both consumptive and non-consumptive. We fish, we hunt,
Yeah,
we recreate just for fun in the outdoors with travel and things like that. And since I've come from both sides, I actually find it an advantage to come from a non-hunting background, because we are all essentially fighting at the end of the day for the same thing, but there is just literally where you draw the line is the bloodshed. Like the hunting and fishing, because something dies, it's viewed as negative and bad. And I can understand why people think that. But what they don't generally understand is that is what's funding these places that they like to go to. Like the people that like to go and on public land and hike and they enjoy like clean rivers and clean streams. All the money that's funding the projects to make these places available to you is from the hunting and fishing side. I'm not 100%. Like there are private people and private organizations that raise money and stuff, and that's a huge part of this
and
whole thing. But like
it's
if you're
from
gonna
hunting and
compare
fishing
like
licenses, right?
hunting fishing
Hunting, fishing,
licenses, the
and
sale of
fishermen.
um the licenses, the sale of ammunition, bows, arrows, guns, all of that stuff contributes. There's taxes. It's an excise tax that the manufacturer has to pay to the government that goes back to conservation. And then there's like the duck stamp. There's all these regulations and stuff, that little things you have to pay for to be able to enjoy hunting. Like, I can't just go buy a gun and hunt. I have to have a hunting license. I have to have a hunter safety ed course. I have to have a lot of the certain like bird species specifically. You have to have special permits. You have to have special types of licenses. You have to buy a special permit per type of bird. Like, it's very complicated in some states, and like it can be very expensive. But a lot of that funds, especially like restoration projects and things of that nature, and wildlife habitat and wildlife research, all is done by that. So like, one of the arguing points we make in the documentary is like all these, and it's not a negative way of looking, all these people that like to go look at beautiful birds and animals, that they just like to go see wildlife. The majority of that funding comes from hunters. And it's like, that's not like a leveraging point against them. They actually, like, we need to start working together. I think the non-consumptive side and the consumptive side need to work together, because like, imagine if they had money coming from buying backpacking equipment. Imagine how much money would go into that system. You know what I mean? Because like, dude,
Yeah.
it's, you and I both know it's nothing for somebody to go buy some high-end backpacking shit and like a fancy jacket and pay $2,000. That's nothing. That's just like a day in REI. And like, the argument gets where it gets sticky is when it comes to that, the hunting side will often say they don't want that to happen, because then these people that don't hunt are going to have a say in how things get regulated. And it's like, so what do we do? That's like where the future is going. And that's kind of the conversations that I've seen happening right now. And it's like, well, do we want to make sure that wildlife populations are healthy and get more money towards them? Or do we want to not give everyone a say? And because like,
Yeah.
I think, well, I was going to say, I think as hunters and fishermen, it's our job to make ourselves not look like assholes. You know what I mean? Like, how many people get a
Totally.
bad rap because they seen one guy like trash a riverbank or something? It's like, there's probably hundreds of people that fish there, but one guy leaves a styrofoam worm container every time he goes. And it's like, we have to change that image. And honestly, as hunters and fishermen, we don't do a great job sometimes. We're terrible with our
Yeah.
PR.
And on the flip side of that, though, and I agree, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of the answer you were going to give before I asked the question, which I guess is it means it's a good question. But I like where you went with it, because I think that's exactly true. And that, I think, may be the next frontier and one of the next political and battles, not battles, but frontiers, I guess, of wilderness and conservation in America, at least. And also, I see a lot of, I'm not deep into it, but I see a lot of chatter that non-consumptive users wouldn't be happy with the tax either, because they don't either understand it, or plus, nobody likes taxes, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is since hunting has been legal in the United States, since like wildlife is a public resource, like nobody owns wildlife, like it's part of like the people's own it. Like, it's very rare in America that anything is owned by the people. You know what I mean? Like, everything else, like we don't have much like stuff that's not privatized or like, but like everything for like the national parks, public land, and wildlife you can't be owned by anyone. They're like a public trust resource that can only be owned by they're owned by everyone. So everyone has equal access to hunt them and fish them. They can't be hunted for market. They can't be hunted for like mass production. Like, that's how they wiped out all that stuff. So you can't just like sell. So like, that's a rarity anywhere in the world. Yeah. And it's it's super cool because like a lot, like even people you hear like, that's my deer, you can't, like they're on my property, they're my deer, and they're not your deer. If they leave your property, they're not your deer, they're never were your deer, and they're a public trust resource. So that's something really cool. And like since it's always been that way, I don't think hunters have a problem with it, because it's like they feel kind of good that like when they buy their hunting license, it's helping with conservation. But like backpacking and canoeing and kayaking and stuff, that would be brand new to them. And yeah, of course you'd have to pay more. And all the hunters are saying like, welcome to the freaking club, dude. Like we've been paying for this the whole time and you get to enjoy it. So like, stop being mean to us. Like we're like, and it doesn't need to be that way, but I don't think a lot of people think about that. It's always like, I always view backpacking as like a relaxing thing that's fun. And that you rarely think about the land you're on. I didn't. I just thought it was a beautiful place to be, but that was also a long time ago before I started thinking about this stuff. And now it's like every time I'm in a place, I'm like, that's what I think about, is like, man, this could go away at any second if people don't fight for it. And like, that's scary. That's what like keeps me up at night. Like a lot of this stuff is here. It could be gone tomorrow. Somebody comes in and passes a bill or something. And it's like, well, that chunk of land's gone forever. Like I don't remember what it was. A couple of things during when Trump was president, he rolled back a couple of like national monuments and stuff, and like that pissed people off so bad. I think they reinstated a couple of them. I haven't followed it super closely, but that's just an example of like things that could happen at any moment. Like you could lose, or they could open up a national park to fracking and mining and all this stuff to extract stuff, and then it's like it just destroys that landscape forever, because like they always promise that they're going to like, oh, it's safe, like fracking. They're like, it's safe and it's not going to be an issue. And then every time they do fracking, they're like, oh, sorry, we fucked it up and polluted the whole entire lake that you've been fishing on that was supposed to be pristine water till the end of time. Whoops. And then nothing happens. So like, you also got to keep that in mind too. Like it's so complicated, dude. Like this is the shit that keeps me up at night. This is like the stuff I think about all the time anymore.
The other interesting thing that I found on my journey of being, now that you've introduced me to the term non-consumptive to consumptive, but I think I agree. I don't like the term. It should just be like, hiker, backpacker to hunter, angler.
Yeah.
Is how much more enjoyable my non-consumptive activities are now that I'm turned on to the wildlife around me because of the hunting and trapping and fishing. So it's like when I'm out in the woods, I'm tuned in to the wildlife around me, the signs. I can look at a tree and see if there's been a rub, or like I'm looking in the mud at tracks. I'm looking at scat and, thinking what's been around here. Just looking at particular habitat and being like, oh, if I'm in the West, like, oh, this is kind of moosey habitat, and creek bed, lush shrubs, like, keep your eyes peeled for a moose, or like, whatever, coyotes, anything. Just being more tuned into that makes hiking and canoeing and all that stuff more enjoyable, because you're just more tuned into the system around you. And, you could do that without trapping and hunting and fishing, but, I don't know, that it certainly turned me more on to understanding the ecosystem around me,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I 100% agree with that. It's like playing a game on easy versus playing a game on expert mode. It's like you just know so much more about the landscape, and it's like I don't look at if I just go kayaking, if I just go out on a river without a fishing rod and just like go down the river, instead of just being like, it's nice out here, I'm having a good time, and I just like not thinking about it, I'm like, man, see that little riffle right there? I bet you there's some fish hiding in there. And like once you understand it at a habitat level, it's like more interesting. It's like
Totally.
there could be a 4 pound smallmouth right there, just hanging out, living his best life. Or then it gets
Next
super
time I'm going to
deep,
get them.
and then you're like, yeah, and I want to come back and find him. But it's like, or there's like this weird little island you kayak past, and you like, oh, I bet you there's like a family of raccoons that lives on that island, and like, there's just so much more to understand and be excited about, rather than just being like, I don't know what's on there, I don't really care. It's like the water becomes alive, the woods become alive, like you just start to be able to like tune into like what's living around you. Like even the like learning birds and learning trees and plants, like it just brings the landscape to life rather than it just being a place that you're at. It's like a place where everything's happening and you can, it's just, I don't know, I find it so much more enjoyable and interesting.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And yeah, and yeah, understanding, the wildlife around you, it's just yeah, it makes it way more interesting. And also this is what I was searching for. I was like, I lost my thought. There it is that uh oh man, now as I said that I lost it again. It's that, what was I going to say? Wildlife, yes, there it is again. It's also predictable. It's like as you learn more about it,
Mhm.
it's strange and it's crazy because like at first you start, oh, you randomly saw something in a random place, but then as you learn more about it, like we're talking about, it's like, okay, it's predictable. Like there's this type of tree or this type of shrub around, so this type of wildlife likes hanging out around that because there's usually
Mhm.
something they can eat, or it's cover, or it's near water. So, those are the three things something needs, right? Food, cover, and, food, home, and water. And so you can kind of start to put together a pattern of the natural world around you. And it becomes not quite as, I mean, it's always a puzzle, which is why it's great, right? Because, right, when you think you understand something, you don't at all the next time you go out. And so there's always a learning
Yep.
curve, but as you learn more, it can and does get more predictable, and it's cool to be able to point those things out and pattern them.
Yeah, and I mean, just take for instance deer. Like deer are beautiful, interesting animals. I love deer. I think they're just so funny how they all like act. Like they're cool animals and I love them to death. And I think they're just so relatable and dorky. Like they're like everybody knows what deer is. Everybody sees deer. And like during hunting season, when it's like the rut, they just act so much not like a deer normally acts. And they're just like usually very like skittish and like they don't want to be around you, or if you're at like a really well traveled park, they could care less that you're there. Like they act different in different circumstances. And then like the only time I'm interested in shooting them is during hunting season. Obviously, it's the only time I can shoot them. But like to watch how they interact during hunting season is almost like funny because they're just like, I had a small little buck walk directly under my tree stand this year, like under my feet. And it's like that would never happen any other time of the year. It's like I don't think I'm that good of a hunter, and for him to do that, he was just like raring and ready to go. And they're just such interesting animals, and they're just so. The more you learn about them, the more cool they get. Like they have scent glands on their legs. They have these weird scent glands all over their body. They like pee all over themselves. They're disgusting feral animals, and like everybody
What
thinks
are
they're like,
the
oh, they're so cute, and it's just like
what are the scent glands on the legs for?
they leave their scent all over the woods when they're bucks. They rub their scent on things. So they're like claiming their territory, you know what I mean? That's why like you'll find they have them like above their, right at the like the base of their antlers and stuff too. So when they're making those rubs and scrapes and things, they're leaving their scent everywhere. They're pissing on everything. It's gross. Like sometimes I walk into a woodlot and I'm like, dude, I could just smells like deer. Like it just stinks in here, and that's a good sign. And yeah, they just have all this, they just do weird stuff and I love it. It's absolutely so cool and fascinating. And like you watch them like lick their noses so the scent particles stick better. And you're just like, what the hell? Like that's just so weird, and I love it. They're weird animals. And I don't know. I don't really know your history with hunting and stuff, but like once you smell that deer smell, it just never leaves. Like you just know that smell forever. It's such like a earthy, like stinky. I just love it at this point. Like, especially when you get all up in
Never
their
hunted
stuff
deer.
when you're okay. You should. It's really
I'd love to. I
it's
want to.
gross and
I got
cool
there's
and
plenty of
yeah. Well, another thing that I love about it too is like I like backpacking. I like going out in the woods and just checking stuff out, and it keeps you in good shape and it's fun and it's challenging, but like hunting keeps me accountable. Like I can't slip. Like with a bow, especially, you have to like practice or you're just shitty. Like, you know what I mean? Like with a gun, you still need to practice like if you want to be accurate, and like for me, I don't want to just maim something. Like that sounds terrible. Like I spend a lot of time shooting in my yard, like with my bow, just like repetitively shooting over and over. And as much as I don't want to do it and it's really boring, like I have this obligation, I feel, to like, if I'm going to pull that trigger, I want to make sure as like to the best of my ability that I'm not going to just like shoot this deer in the leg and like make it live like
right.
in pain for days before it dies or something. You know what I mean? So like, it keeps me accountable. It keeps me like constantly thinking, and it keeps me exploring like these animals in detail. I would have never learned about a deer if I didn't deer hunt. I would have never learned about a smallmouth if you hadn't got me obsessed with them. Actually, it's your fault. Those pictures of you
Really
holding those
great.
giant smallmouth ruined my life. No,
Heck
and it's
yeah.
just like I've read probably 5 books on smallmouth at this point. I love them. They're such cool fish. I would have never learned
What
about them if I wouldn't have seen you like what's
I
that?
love that, man. I love that. That's great. What's your favorite tidbit you got about smallmouth? What's interesting about smallmouth that you like?
I just think that they're cool because they're not like largemouth bass. They're just different enough that they're their own thing, and they're so aggressive, man. Like
Oh yeah.
you just know when they hit because they're so even the small ones are like impressive for how hard they fight. And I just I don't know. This is just like a gut feeling. Like I just think they're a little bit smarter than largemouth bass. Like I feel like
Oh, meaner,
they have this little like
smarter,
yeah, they're
more
meaner and they
powerful.
have this like I don't want your shitty crankbait right now. You know, they can just
Yeah.
be real I mean, largemouth bass can be picky too, but like there's something about a smallmouth that's just they're mean, they're Midwest, and they're just like they got this appeal to them that I just love. I can't put my finger on it, but I don't know. I think I like that they're more so suited to rivers. I think that's cool. River
Yep.
fishing is like the last frontier in fishing. It's like everything is if you go out in the ocean, those guys are so freaking dialed in. They like go to the same hump with the same spot with the same, and you're like guaranteed you're gonna catch a fish every time you go. And like with largemouth, like guys have, what multi-$1,000 live scope and stuff, and it's like you can still catch smallmouth like that, and they're in big lakes and stuff like that too. But I think like rivers are so interesting because it's not like a lake. Like a lake is pretty much always the same. Like you can depend on like this piece of structure as being there. A river is like the explorers fishing. Like it could change tomorrow. Like the
Totally.
water could drop 2 feet and there's nothing is the same and you just have to learn it over and over. And it's so frustrating and it's so fun. And you'll
Yeah,
catch
I
so
love
many
it.
freaking catfish instead of smallmouth. It's like, it's fun, man.
I love it too,
I
man. It's
love
the
it.
best. And it's yeah, exactly like you're saying, it's dynamic. It changes
Yes.
on the day, it changes on the season. And so you have to be thinking about what the water level's at, what the temperature's at. Plus, you just don't always know what's around the next bend, which is interesting. Um, but also, what I love about rivers is it is dynamic, it is always changing, it is all of those things, but also similar to patterning, whatever animal, whitetail, ducks, whatever, um, or just understanding the environment around you. Like I understand rivers pretty well at this point. I think obviously I am get humbled all the time, but like just like the forces that create rivers, like it's going to be slower around the bend, around the inside is going to be where the deepest channel is. It's like the sandbars are going to be near the bend. Uh you're going to have in classic smallmouth rivers, you're going to have, or trout rivers too, your pool riffle, drop, and you have different sections of the river that hold different styles of fish, different species of fish, depending on what the habitat and environment they like. And so while it's all changing, it's still also kind of familiar. And you can I love looking at the water and seeing all the different currents mixing and trying to pick the best line with the boat. And yeah, man, river fishing's the best.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think people in the line of thinking like you and me who just like to explore for the sake of it, like I think we're more attracted to stuff like that because it's a little more challenging. Like if you're not looking for a challenge, then it's probably not for you. Like fishing in general is probably not for you, or hunting, because like it's always hard. Like it never is like we've talked about this in the past. It's like sometimes you just have a day where you can't miss and you feel like God. But most of the time you're like, I'm never going to catch a fish again. What the heck am I doing? And then like it's not so static. It's not a video game where it's like, yeah, it's hard, but like they want you to win, so you're just addicted enough to it to keep coming back. Where it's like fishing is like you could go out for 3 days or 5 days or a month in a row and not catch a single thing. But
I
like
know. And
it's that's just what it is.
it's so funny too that all the time I have to tell myself, especially if I'm fishing with other people, when you do get into one of those good days, it seems like it's going to last forever. It seems like you just, yeah, like you're saying, like you're God, or like you just can't miss. And it's like hard to believe. It's like, all right, man, we're coming back here tomorrow, same place, same time. We're going to hammer them. And then you show up tomorrow and it's like the bite is off and you're like, what the hell? Like yesterday, this was like the most electric fishing in the world. What the fuck? Where'd all the fish go?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I always have to tell myself when I'm fishing and it's good, it's like, hey man, it's going off right now. Like it might not be like this again. So let's enjoy this, let's stay a little bit longer and really get them in.
Yeah, there's days. So I have this. I'm very lucky that there's this, like, living where I live. It's just cornfield and cornfield. Like the river's about a half hour away. The lake is probably Lake Erie is like a good 40-minute drive for me, 45 minutes. There's a pond across the street that's like just like a what is it, like a state wildlife area or something. So I go over there, and that's where I like schooled myself on fly fishing because it is loaded with bluegill, dude. That just little pond has so much bluegill in it, and they're like like some of them are pretty good size, and like I love bluegill fishing because it can be just as frustrating as bass fishing depending on the day. Like they're a lot more apt to eat like what you're throwing at them, and they're not as particular sometimes. But dude, there's been days where I've gone out there and it'll even be like the perfect, like the pressure's going down or whatever. You're supposed to like have all these little tricks that are like the best time to eat the fish are going to be eating. It's right at sunset and they're coming up and rising and it's 75 degrees out. And like some days I'll throw anything. I'll pick the randomest fly out of my box and that will just annihilate it. And then I'll go back the next day and it's like supposed to be the perfect conditions. Like, oh, there's a storm rolling and it's going to be the perfect day to fish. And then like they will not eat anything, or they'll only eat something under the surface. And like bluegill fishing can be just as tough as bass fishing if you're trying to catch bigger bluegill, because they're not as dumb as the little ones. The little ones that you accidentally like fling halfway across the pond when you back cast, you didn't even realize they were on there. Like that, you can catch those pretty easily. But like some of those big suckers, dude, I've watched them come up to the fly and just look at it a little bit before attacking it, and they're like deciding like, I don't know, this team's kind of screwed up, man, and then they'll go for it. And I'll just like I have this little purple custom made purple fiberglass 3-weight rod, and I just wear them out on that thing, and I absolutely
That's
love it, dude.
hilarious.
It's like I get so
Amazing.
excited, and it pisses the old dudes off over there because they're all using a bobber and a worm, and they won't catch a thing. And I'll go over there and catch like 30 bluegill,
Ah,
and with my fly rod, and they look at me like they want to murder me. It's like I love it. I can't
that's
get
hilarious.
enough of it.
That's hilarious. The thing about bluegill too is a lot of people's first fish. Probably one of my first fish, like going out on my own with my buddies as a kid down to the local pond, like you said, with a worm and a bobber. But like bass is one thing when they're not biting. Even though you know they're there, you can kind of tell yourself like, oh, maybe maybe they're somewhere else, like they're just not here today or whatever. Sometimes you can lie to yourself. But with bluegill, it's like
Yeah.
you're in a little pond. Half the time you can see them in like a foot of water at the edge,
Yeah.
and you're pulling your fly by or your worm or your hair jig or whatever, and you're like seeing them look at it, or you're seeing the little ones come and like take it away from the big one, and it's like they're there. So when they're not biting it, it's just more frustrating. It's like, all right, I know this isn't a marlin. Like I'm here to catch something. Like take the freaking fly,
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had days, dude. Bass fishing is fun too. I really love it. I just like, I'm always torn. I love fishing with soft plastics and I love fishing with crankbaits, but like, dude, bass on the fly is just, it's just so much different. But
Best.
like, I have a hard time with it because I do a lot of lake fishing and it's like, I have to get sinking line and I have to like just do like basically start over. You know what I mean? So like learning from scratch. So that's a fun challenge. I've caught a few decent bass on the fly and it's just so fun. But like I've caught nothing compares to the smallmouth. Back to the smallmouth. It's just like that and like
It's the best.
I don't know, freshwater drum. Those things fight so freaking hard, dude. I accidentally
I'm
caught one in the
also
Maumee River.
That's yeah, drum are awesome and cool, and yeah, they pull hard and fast. I'm also partial to I think probably my favorite fish, my favorite game fish, the high and mighty alpha predator of most waters I'm on, the northern pike. Toothy, gritty,
Yeah.
mean, alpha dog, just absolute beast, and people hate them. Slimy, nasty gators. Lots of people like throw them on the banks, but man, I don't know if
I
there's a
hate
better
that.
game fish than that. They crush top water. They crush it all.
Yeah. I I've caught many pike as bycatch from trying to catch bass, just ripping crankbaits fast as shit when it's like hot as hell out in the summer.
Oh
I
yeah,
like it's so weird too because I read this book on pike and they were like pike are pretty much inactive in the summer and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I go out and I just am like ripping crankbaits on this weedy edge, deep crankbaits for bass and like first thing in the morning and I would say 5 out of 10, well, probably like, 2 out of 10 times it's a freaking pike and
yeah.
they're just yeah, they're built for speed, man. They're built to be fast
He's
and like you feel it and
ambush.
it's like it feels like a dump truck hit it and then you get them pretty close and you're like, is this fish even still on there? And they just kind of like give up sometimes. They're so strange, but I love fighting them. I want to catch one on the fly rod so bad. Like that's one of my goals is to catch one of them on the fly rod. I have not been able to make it happen this year or last year, and I'm excited to
What
try.
um
You know?
gonna wind her down here slowly, but what are you looking forward to in 2024? Fishing, hunting, documentary stuff. What are you looking forward to?
Oh god, there's a lot, man. I'm excited for if this temperature stays this way, we might get some ice fishing in this year out of my end of town. I did not get to go
There you
once
go.
last year, so I'm kind of hoping it stays cold. We'll see. It just you never know out here. It swings so drastically. Like last year, it got down to like below freezing for like a week and then it got back up to like 60 and then it went back to and then the ice was never stable enough where I live to be able to get out on it, but I'm hoping this year we can get a little bit of ice fishing in. And then I would love, I'm obviously going to be fly fishing most of the summer. Definitely looking forward to doing a little bit of traveling. I got some trips lined up. I'll be going to Texas here in March, and then I'll probably be going back to Colorado again sometime in the fall. And I'm working on a couple of projects with my friend Chester, who is in the film I just put out, The Hunt Within. Um, and we're doing some wildlife projects and some like big game species in North America. We're filming some like elk and wild sheep and stuff like that. We got a project we just finished, a little mini documentary about his nonprofit that takes kids out into the wildlife does wildlife stuff with them out in cool places. Like we were just in Colorado filming. So I'm
Awesome.
looking forward to that getting released. And then, I'm just working on some more projects about this North American model stuff. And then obviously these mini doc podcasts I'm working out right now. I'm excited about those because they're a lot more challenging to make, but they're fun. And then, yeah, just now that the hunting season's winding down, I'm getting excited to fish again.
That's great, man. Me too. And the cool thing about the mini podcast documentaries that you're doing, which by the way, all this stuff can be found. Aptitude? The best way to get to it is just Google Aptitude Outdoors.
Yeah, so you can find the main places that I'm at is obviously on my YouTube channel. That's kind of where I do most of my stuff. It's Aptitude Outdoors Podcast. I might just change it to Aptitude Outdoors here soon because I'm kind of expanding what I'm doing. But as of right now, you can just type in Aptitude Outdoors anywhere. Aptitude, Aptitude. I say it very fast, so it sounds like just a slurry of words or letters. And we also, my friend Seth and I literally just tore down the website from scratch and rebuilt it. I'm going to be doing a lot more writing on there about conservation, blog style stuff about fishing and hunting and conservation. So you can go to aptitudeoutdoors.com and there's a lot more resources on there. But yeah, the podcasts and the documentaries are kind of like the main thing. So head over to YouTube and obviously Instagram, Facebook, all that fun stuff if you are interested in that kind of thing.
And yeah, it's great about the podcast, like the style of podcast that you're doing now of these episodes of kind of like chronicling conservation figures of the past. It's like just priming you for voiceovers, more for voiceover work for your future documentaries too. So it's like lots of practice. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I'm glad you invited me back on. It's always good to catch up, and I appreciate, you having me talk about this stuff. I'm really hoping people will go check out the film. It's not like an hour. It's like 15 minutes. So you don't have to suffer through an hour film. But we put a lot of work into it. And so thank you for helping me promote that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Take it easy. Take care. And we should definitely get together, Paul, and do some fishing, river trip this fall or this spring or summer, man.
We'll make it happen, dude. You don't live that far. So that sounds awesome.
And there you have it. Conversation with Paul Fuzinski of the Aptitude Outdoors podcast and YouTube channel. Again, his new documentary called The Hunt Within. You can find that on his YouTube channel. 2024 guided canoe trips are out at buffaloroamer.com. Dates are out. Information is out. Reach out to me for more information. Would love to get out on the river with you in 2024. It's going to be a blast. We got some awesome destinations. So check it out at buffaloroamer.com. Thank you to Fischel Paddles, makers of fine handcrafted wooden canoe paddles, FISHELL paddles.com. Thank you to SREgear.com, family-owned and operated outdoor gear shop in Black River Falls, Wisconsin, SREgear.com. Enjoy the day, get some fresh air, enjoy the night wherever you're listening. We'll see you downriver.